Our group project is about sustainability and mindfulness. The group members are Madison Proctor, Tyler Johnson, Jordan Hunt, and Matthew Stewart. There are various ways to define mindfulness, but the American Psychological Association defined mindfulness as a moment-to-moment awareness of one's experience without judgment. In this sense, mindfulness is a state and not a trait. While it may be promoted by certain practices or activities, such as meditation, it is not equivalent to them. This is because you become mindful and are not born mindful. Being mindful means a lot of things. It is a conscious effort to be present in what you're doing, and it is very beneficial to the environment to be mindful of it. Our environment is so important because it will affect our future generations if we are not keeping up with our planet. An article called Mindfulness and Sustainability talks about how these sustainable behaviors are actually better for your subjective well-being other than just the environment. So there are other reasons to use these behaviors besides for the planet. Sustainability is the responsibility of interacting with the planet to maintain and improve natural resources. Because our population is increasing, our resources are being used more and more, and this can affect a lot of things, such as air quality, animal and plant life and habitats, greenhouse gases, and the list goes on. If we teach this to children and adults as much as we can, this will improve our planet tremendously. People need to know what to do in order to act on sustainable behaviors. These behaviors will help at a local level, but it'll be more effective at a global or community level. So we need to figure out how to do these and implement these to make them at a global level. There was a study done and it found that many cities lack sustainability because they were not replacing dead or hazardous trees with new ones. The averages were much higher for size in trees because there were barely any new trees being added. This damage is irreversible because it takes years for trees to grow back and it needs to be changed immediately. There is also a lack of community feel in that city because there was no group to help improve the environment.
So, in terms of some struggles that we feel people are facing when it comes to sustainability, one of the main struggles we found was a lack of motivation. Franz and Mayer touched on this briefly when going through the 5 criteria that we can use to determine whether or not someone will take action in terms of climate change, more specifically sustainability. Of the 5 criteria, the one we feel that most people struggle with is feeling personally responsible to act. Most individuals know what needs to be done and understand the emergence of most ideas. However, most individuals feel as though they aren't responsible because of the billions of other people who could be taking actions but aren't. This mindset is known as diffusion of responsibility. When in that large group, you feel as though someone else is more qualified to help, so you are less inclined to help due to them being more qualified. Another struggle we see with sustainability is the cost and benefit analysis. How much time and effort someone puts in compared to the reward they will receive for performing that behavior. Tobler wrote an article about this. He said that one of the problems with addressing climate change is that the rewards to climate change are practically invisible to the individual. Tobler also said that typically there are also more immediate problems that are going to take precedence over climate change acts since they will also show more immediate results. The study that Tobler performed was able to conclude that the perceived costs and benefits a person would receive from a particular behavior was a strong indicator of their willingness to participate in climate change. Behaviors that were perceived as high cost, such as not riding in cars or flying in airplanes, a person was less likely to implement those ideas into their lifestyle, mainly because there was little benefit to them if they were to do that. This is why we see so many more people are willing to perform low-cost behaviors such as recycling, because although they may not see their benefits, it causes less of an impact on their lifestyle. Although this is a good thing that they are at least performing these low-cost behaviors, they have a much smaller impact on climate change than do the high-cost behaviors. So we would like to figure out a way to implement some high-cost behaviors into everyday life so we can have a larger impact on climate change. We found much research covering a wide range of effective practices when it comes to sustainability and mindfulness practices. Wamsler and Brink surveyed approximately 200 people in the Scania region of Sweden, a place in Sweden suspected to be the hardest hit from climate change. Through their survey, they were able to conclude that there was in fact a link between individual mindfulness and large-scale change that could support climate adaptation. This mindfulness is linked to those individuals being more willing to take action. Although this may not be important in terms of something to add to a mindfulness program, we felt it was important to add because it is proof that more motivated individuals are willing to be mindful of sustainability, something we had concerns about from the beginning. Erickson and colleagues were able to go a little more in depth about how to incorporate sustainability into a person's life and concluded that there were four main principles necessary in order to adapt to a more sustainable lifestyle. The principles they concluded were recognizing the context for vulnerability and introducing multiple stressors, acknowledging how different values and interests affect the adaptation process, integrating local knowledge, and considering the potential feedback throughout the process. Erickson and colleagues felt that not only were these principles important, but if you were to be more aware of social aspects as well as the many changes that may occur along the process of adaptation, that individuals should be able to adapt to a more sustainable lifestyle. Lastly, we felt that the idea of community or becoming mindful as a group was of importance as well. Erickson, with a C, talked about how an individual who is more mindful is very likely to have an increased well being through clarification of what their true goals and values are. One way they say you could get this clarity is by adopting a more community based set of values. However, in order to do that, you must grow the relationships around you in order to form that sort of community they are talking about. Erickson felt that mindfulness was best taught in a group setting, anyways, whether that was at school, work, church, or anywhere else that could be a group setting. Nadubsi was also able to conclude something similar to Erickson. Nadubsi concluded that when incorporating mindfulness at the company level, it was important to express ideals of the boss and share that with the rest of the company. Through that collaboration, they found a positive relationship between mindful organizing and environmental sustainability. A relationship that further solidifies the ideas that Erickson concluded, which were that collaboration is key since it allows for some accountability between individuals in the group to be able to incorporate mindfulness.
Here are some tips that supplement our purpose. Practice being mindful. Be conscious of your responses, perspectives, and try to consider long term consequences and impacts. Consume less. Our profound attachment to consuming for pleasure, comfort, and boredom is becoming more and more difficult to reverse. Try to practice seeing the abundance in your life and take a moment to see and feel how much you really have. If we can all shift our thought process from not enough to enough, we can reduce our overconsumption and change our mindset. Get involved. Although change is needed and desired by many, we are restricted by our surroundings. In this case, if we all work together on big tasks such as the design of more sustainable cities, buildings, and transportation systems, we have the potential to make a huge impact on environmental sustainability and mindfulness.
Since mindfulness is a mindset and a way of life on an individual level, it can be hard to find ways to fully implement it to society. As mentioned before, lessons are best learned and resonated within group settings like school, work, and so on. Yet past life experiences help us understand that people do not always follow what their government officials or higher authorities tell them to do. In order for people to change and live more sustainably, we have to make them want to. When we try and look at ways to implement mindfulness and sustainability within our society, it is important to recognize how others are doing it. Early traditions such as Buddhism bring mindfulness and sustainability as a central part to their religion. This is recognized in the Journal of Management on Contemplating Mindfulness at Work. The authors of this study expand on these mindsets and put them into practice within the workplace. As a result on this study, individuals who were trained in mindfulness had direct positive influences on three clusters of outcomes: performance, relationships, and well-being. However, the workplace is not the only environment where mindfulness benefits the individual. It is imperative that these practices are applied to everyday life and also what we consume daily for the sake of our environment's future. For our means of implementation, we look at the United Nations Plan on Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And while they had 17 goals regarding sustainability, two of them stood out from the rest. The first one, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. And two, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. While utilizing this part of the plan, our first idea in implementing mindfulness would be to educate people on their own self-worth and help them see how valuable life itself really is. We find this to be important, especially for those that see little value in the lives they live today. If we do this, we anticipate that people will live more positive and productive lifestyles. And if we educate ourselves and society on mindfulness, the next phase will follow suit. With respect to the second goal, combating climate change, what we can implement into society is to encourage them to decrease their carbon footprint and living more sustainable lives, such as by using electric cars, solar or wind power, eating less processed foods, and even recycling. With further education of mindfulness, people will hold the environment to a higher regard and actively care for the world around them.
Being mindful of sustainable behaviors will help our future generations in many ways. Go out in the world and use these behaviors as well as teach them. Lastly, these are the discussion questions for our presentation.